they really wanted to wait for a claim. So at this day, and I spoke with our VP claims yesterday, liability wise, we haven't seen any claims arising from COVID-19. So we don't have a firm position on any wording right now. So, but still, various businesses may be exposed to a claim from a third party alleging negligence managing the virus outbreak. So some policies contain exclusions specifically arising from a pandemic, virus, or a bacteria. So those who have that in their policies, it could mean that they don't have, the coverage if something happens. So, but it's not in general. And I'll go into the definition of a bodily injury because it's going to give you an overview of how gray it is in terms of is it covered or should that be covered or not, right? One thing I need to share with you is at renewal right now, what we're seeing from the insurers is they are adding an exclusion for COVID. They are adding exclusion for communicable disease on every policy. So that's something that we see at renewals. So not during the policy term. The only way they can add that during policy terms is if there is any changes within the nature of your risk. So I'm giving you an example. So let's say that, we started quarantine, the lockdown is fully started, so there's not much we can do to operate. So some people or some organizations started to bring some creative idea of doing some stuff online for their members or which was, maybe online training or so at that point, our clients were coming to us and asked, if they could do that. Is it covered or is not covered, right? So different insurers, we were getting to the insurers. And as soon as you're reopening up what you're doing or asking the insurer to look at the different activities, it can add an exclusion for it. So, and most of them took advantage of it. So, but if you don't have any exclusion within your policy, I'm not saying it's covered, but most likely at renewal, they might add an exclusion for it. So to the best of my knowledge, all insurers are doing it right now. So those who don't have exclusion right now, it's mainly because it was renewal. The renewal, it was renewed before COVID crisis happened. So if I'm getting into the definition of a bodily injury, bodily injury means in many policies, it's not always the same, but the most common one that we're seeing is bodily injury means bodily injury, sickness, disease sustained by a person, including death resulting from any of these at any time. So at first sight, you see sickness, you see disease, and said, you know what? Okay, good. I should be okay. But yet, no insurers taking position on it. Would they argue that it's a pandemic and not a disease? We don't know. So we don't know, and until we have a court or we have a case in front of a judge, we're not sure that it will be or not covered. So BC government issued a special ministerial order to protect amateur sports organizations. So some of you might have seen that during the last few weeks. It was basically because no sporting organization out of BC who probably were in the renewal mode could have access to coverage for COVID. So the government take position to bring protection to these PSOs out of BC, telling that they should not be liable if someone's getting COVID because of it, or arguing that they got it because of it. So we believe that it's a very good thing by the BC government to do it. We hope that other provinces might look to do the same, but because down the line, and again, I'm in Quebec right now, so I know things are different across the country, but in Quebec we are reopening sports. My kids are back on the ice, not playing the game, but they have some skills. My youngest one's playing baseball, and they're adapting what they do based on everything that the health and authorities are saying here in Quebec. But still, there is not some danger, but there is some exposure that, at some point a kid or somebody could get it. So this is for general liability. So there is no for sure fact that it's covered or it's not covered. We believe that at some point, there will be a suit, somebody suing somebody to maybe to get it. But we'll find out more when the insurer is taking a firm position on it. Phase 2, again, are we covered? Directors and officer liability. Although the annual liability policies will generally exclude claims alleging direct bodily injury or property damage, this is more a general liability policy than a director's and officer liability. Sometimes the allegations are gray and are more leading to the fact that it's an administrative decision. So it could lead to something on the director's and officer liability. What you need to look at on your policy is if there is an absolute exclusion for bodily injury. So if it's not an absolute exclusion, there might be some allegation it could be accepted. But if you have an absolute exclusion, it's a determining consideration, and you're doing policy providing coverage for a scenario like that. So one thing you need to look if you have an absolute exclusion on your directors and officer liability for bodily injury. So that's a key thing that you need to look at. The other type of policy is a property policy, and that policy sometimes there is a business interruption coverage that is usually an extension of an insurance property policy. So that one we have seen some claims arising of it. But one thing you need to keep in mind for that business interruption coverage attached to a property policy is coverage provided that property insured are subject to damage to insured property by an insured peril. So basically what it means, you need to have a physical damage to your property in order to trigger the business interruption aspect. So, and it was quite interesting to see how the insurers were reacting to that. And there was something coming out from the state. I remember President Trump on TV saying that, all these companies paid premium for many years, that they should be covered for business interruption, no matter if it's the government who shut down everything, no matter if it's, it's mandatory to close your business. So obviously what we've done, like they did in the States, we did report all these business interruption claims to insurers for them to take a position, even if we knew that most likely it would be denied. But it was a way as well to, make the government aware that, this is not covered on an insurance policy. And in the state, there was rumor coming out from the state saying, maybe at some point, the insurer or the government will take a position and said, or force the insurers to, to do something or work in partnership with them to find solution. Obviously in Canada, the government take, serious measures to help protecting, the businesses and support them. So, but we haven't had any result in terms of, what they did with the government related to that. But it was a way to, make them aware that, this is not covered on an insurance policy. So, and if you think about it, if it was covered on an insurance policy for business interruption, there will be no insurer who would have survived that crisis. So it would be, would that mean bankrupt? Because basically most of businesses have that coverage on their property policy, and, would mean that, the losses would have been, huge. So it would be impossible for to go through consequences from this magnitude. So that was the three main policies that I wanted to discuss and how they could react to COVID. And again, I know it's very gray because, there's no certainty outside of the business interruption coverage. And but yeah, without any claims right now, they don't take position. And business interruption, you need to have a covered peril, so meaning a physical damage to that makes that your business cannot operate. So authorities or stopped by the government, it's not sufficient to trigger that coverage. So it brings me to the return to play or return to reopening phase, because that's what we're seeing right now in Quebec. I know Ontario did some stuff recently, same thing in BC, and I know there's various provinces who started back to go back a little bit to normal, if I can say so. Insurance wise, what can I say to you to work with the insurer on that? It's obviously follow the guidelines of your respective prevents health and safety authorities. That's the main key. Adapt your risk and safety procedures to the new reality of it. Most important one, have a complete return to play or reopening plan that should be shared with your members. So specific to COVID. So this is huge when we go back to the insurer asking him, okay, they are ready to reopen. They will do that, and the first thing they are asking is do you have something specific to COVID? So if needed, make sure your plan is approved by competent authorities. Provide guidance, support, and training when needed to your volunteers, your staff, your participants, depending what type of activities you're doing. Waivers or assumption of risk form adapted to your activities is very important. The insurers are asking that question all the time. Obviously, I'm a broker. I'm not a lawyer, so I know we have great, sports lawyer in Canada. I've been in touch with many of them, and I know many of my clients were in touch with some of them as well. So seek legal counsel for that. So it's very important, and it's going to give us some ammunition with the insurer to work on your file. So make sure you're in constant communication with your clients, your membership, your participants. This is key. And last advice regarding return to play or reopening, make sure you communicate any changes to your broker and insurers. I would say more is better. So just make sure that you communicate well. I gave you the example of virtual training. That I had numerous requests for stuff virtual during the pandemic, and it was good to be able to work with insurers, and they were open to that. So, but just make sure they know that you might do things a little bit differently. So that was for the return to play. So what about the after? Because obviously, as I mentioned, there was a hard market before. We were already in a phase where, rates were getting higher. But what is the impact? And that's where I want to get into the event cancellation policies. That is, very popular on the entertainment side, sports side, anything related to venues and everything. So what is the impact on that? So event cancellation policy typically covers additional costs, expense, or lost revenue when a planned event is canceled, postponed, interrupted, or relocated due to unforeseen circumstances. So I want to underline unforeseen circumstances because, when we got into March, after the waiting phase, 2 weeks, we got a lot of phone calls from our client and said, hey, Sasha, I would need an event cancellation policy. And I said, well, for COVID, and said, yeah, I need, because my event what happened this summer, right? So I said, well, it's impossible to do or had an event cancellation policy for something that that could lead to your event to be canceled. So this is the premises of an event cancellation policy. Everything that could lead to your event to be canceled, the insurer will never cover that. So it's part of the question they will ask you. So so obviously it was a lot of phone calls for that. So event cancellation policy for me, it's a gamble, right? It costs, I would not say a lot of money, but it's the price for it, it's expensive. and it could go over what you're paying for the three core policies that I mentioned without you even having access to it or never using it, right? It's more common to have a liability claim, a director's office claim, or a property claim than having an event cancellation policy. I've seen one claims within my last 9 years at DFL related to event cancellation. And one thing you need to know as well is event cancellation policies are a la carte type of policies. So, you have a base coverage, which is covering, mainly, if the facility is not, able to or not, or have a physical damage, or I don't know if the rink is not available, or these type of stuff are on the base coverage. But there is various optional coverage available, like, limited tourism. Communicable disease was one of them as well, and I get into that just in a few seconds. Catastrophic non-appearance from teams, athletes, it could be performers for those who have some entertainment in their activities. Severe weather is usually included in most policies that have events inside. Usually it's not covered when it's outside, so you can add that to your policy, but it's an option. And strike risk, it's another one you can have. So communicable disease obviously is one of them, which COVID could have fall under. Ironically, terrorism was way more popular than communicable disease, right? Related to what we remember in the past, right? September 11, 2001 was, certainly one of the reasons why terrorism was more popular for those who were buying these type of policies, because it was touching us more, right? Because we saw everything happening in New York and Washington back then. But communicable disease was not that popular. So if I can give you the example of Wimbledon, they bought that policies for the last 17 years. They said that they invested $32 million within the last 17 years, so roughly $2 million per year. And it's no surprise that they were one of the first events to be canceled this year. You saw what the French Open, Roland Garros did. They, and I don't know exactly what is the status now, but very fast at the beginning of it, they postponed their tournament to the fall, where Wimbledon said, we'll cancel it, and the payout was $142 million US for that policy. So very easy to say that hey, we should have bought the same type of coverage, but they paid $32 million within the last 17 years without having any claims related to it. So and I bet the roughly the $2 million they invested yearly is the cost for that. It's way more compared to the other three policies that everyone needs: the liability and the directors and officer and the property, and I'm sure they have more policies than that. So it was like a gamble again, as per me. That was a good payout for them this year, and it protected them, but it's a massive investment they needed to do. These type of policies can be bought 36 months in advance without having any impact on the premium. So it doesn't matter if you secure the coverage 3 months before or 36 months. So the same kind of rating is applying, but you cannot do it 30 days prior to the event. So it's and some in the past we were seeing 20 days they were accepting and do it. Not right now, obviously these insurers, because there's not 10 insurers who's doing event cancellation. There's a handful of market who's doing it. Most of them are from London. It's a Lloyd's of London market. Right now, what we're seeing, and it was the same with 9/11. They don't write communicable disease anymore right now, so they are in a stop mode for that. And even if they are starting to write it again, keep in mind for sure that COVID, stress, H1N1, swine flu will be excluded forever from these policies. So basically, if the coverage is becoming available again in the near future, because we believe that it will come back at some point when we know a little bit more, what's in front of us. But these coverages won't be available. So it will be basically to cover the COVID-20 or COVID-21 if something happening in that sense. So, but as for now, there is no market covering or providing quotes for communicable disease at this point, from what I know from the market at this point. One thing I need to tell you too, right? Things are changing fast these days, right? There was no exclusion right at the beginning, and suddenly a couple of weeks afterward, insurers are starting to add exclusion about COVID. So the market is reacting. Everyone is reacting to what's happening right now. So you can keep that in mind for that. And the rating, obviously, we've seen rate raise for event cancellation between 40 and 50% right now. The same type of policies we had 6 months ago. So there was definitely a huge raise, and there is a huge losses on that front. The Olympics, they had that type of policies as well. So there is major loss related to it. What's next? We still are in COVID crisis, right? Things are reopening, but it doesn't mean that things are over yet. You need to keep monitoring the evolution of what your provincial L and securities authority are asking and what their position is. What's to expect next from the insurance market? I mentioned that many times during my presentation. Communicable disease exclusion to be added to your insurance policies at renewal. So at this point, it's most likely what's going to happen. No possibilities at this time right now to include communicable disease for an event cancellation policy. So what we hope for, what we are working with the insurers right now on kind of solutions. So we would like to work with insurers for them to accept to add a sublimit to cover legal defense on a general liability policy related specifically to COVID-19. That people could sue you or taking procedures against you related to it. So because this is a personal comment, right? In order for somebody to sue you, you will have to prove that you're the reason why you caught COVID. So it's the claimant who needs to prove that. So and in order to do that, I believe, and again, it's not BFL position, it's my personal position, that it will be extremely hard to prove without any doubt that it's your fault or it's your organization's fault that it has caused that. So, but obviously you need to take that in consideration. You need to take the measures, right? If your event is ran, or if you're postponing your event, you need to adapt yourself when things will reopen and when, people will be back in the stand. So, but still, if somebody's suing you, even if it will be extremely hard for him to prove that, the COVID was caught, because of you, and he needs to prove your negligence, it still needs some lawyers and legal fees to take you out of it or to defend you. So that's why we're working with insurers right now on stuff like that. So return of the option to include communicable disease to an event cancellation policy. And again, excluding all these, virus that, occurred within the last few years. We hope that it's going to be back soon on the market. But at this point, it is not. So I know I went very fast, and I'm sorry the PowerPoint doesn't seem to run, but I know it will be online after the presentation. So you'll have all these comments and my presentation online. Rick, I don't know if people have questions. I'll be more than happy to try to answer them if I have the answers. I know the presentation doesn't sound too positive, but keep in mind that things are changing fast, and everyone's trying to adapt themselves. So that was the comment that I have for the insurance today.
Very good. Thanks very much, Sasha. There are some questions, and once again, apologies for the technical challenges. As Sasha mentioned, the PowerPoint will be online by tomorrow. A couple of things have come up. Now, recognizing that the that the whole waiver issue that we're hearing a lot about is potentially more of a legal falls within the legal realm. Are there any implications from an insurance coverage standpoint with waivers, having participants or spectators signing waivers absolving the organizer of potentially any liability?
Well, the first thing again is you need to follow the authorities' guidelines, right? So if you're not able to go in the rink or go anywhere, right, you need to follow that. That's the first premises. As per me, a waiver or a form, an acknowledgement of risk form is more a risk control tool, just to inform people that there is risk attached to it. And again, you have Quebec, who is the common law, but you have the rest of Canada, the rest of Canada's common law, and we have the civil code here in Quebec, which is totally two different things, right? And it's looked at differently. But one thing for sure, insurers used to ask if there was waiver completed without asking a copy of it. Now they're asking to see a copy of it, and they're asking to have stuff related to COVID specifically on it. But again, it's more on a legal counsel that you need to work with. But I've seen a couple of very good examples coming out from various PSOs and national governing body that we're working with.
Okay. Here's a question. We are in discussions for renewing our insurance, and our insurance is uncertain about covering online events, online practices and workouts, for example. One thing they suggested was having us monitor members through webcams while they work out, which is not possible for us. Do you have any other solutions that perhaps may have worked for others?
Well, we had a lot of situations similar to that. Some insurers are more, stiff on it, and has that, you have access to, see what's happening full time. There is some insurers who are a little bit more soft on it, but down the line, they want you to monitor who's doing what. They would like, at least they want to have a record of it, without necessarily, having them filming themselves. Other insurers are asking that there is a a limited number of people who are doing it online to be able to keep track of what they're doing. But you need to work with your insurer on that. And there is some possibilities. But again, we're going back to the waiver or the acknowledgement of risk, right? If you're all by yourself at home doing something, you're following the guideline of your federation or organization, you need to get to your member and say, there is some risk doing it because we're not there to support you, or we're not there to teach you specifically. So usually what we were seeing was like, not too hard exercise, like common, like, dry land training or soft, not soft. I don't like the word soft, but, more common thing that was not too dangerous to do without supervision of anybody. But there is some insurers who are more flexible than others, for sure.
Okay. Dave Piman asks, isn't contamination damage to property? Isn't it considered the same thing as damage to property?
Yeah, this is on the property side. This is definitely one question that was coming up. I can't say we didn't have any situation related to it. So once again, we don't have, a firm position from an insurer related to it, because most of these companies, were shut down, right? So there was no propagation of the virus related to it. But this could be a good question. If, I can ask our VP claims what his position related to it. But yes, there is some policies who have contamination part of their coverages. Would that coverage be triggered with COVID? That's a good question.
Yeah. So it hasn't been tested yet, I guess.
No.
Right? Yeah. Another question. How do you suggest we protect ourselves for events in 2021? Hotel, venue, transportation, etc. Contracts are all due soon, but there's still a risk that events could be canceled for next year. You've identified that event cancellation policies will not cover COVID-19. So will we be liable for all our contracts if the event is canceled?
Well, I guess it depends of each and respective contracts. I've been involved with, some events that were canceled. And again, I cannot go too much into details, but, I think people in Canada were really good in terms of, working, to be, to adapt themselves, right? If the event is postponed or something like that. I've seen a lot of good faith from various partners and companies. But it's definitely a challenge if you don't have, if you're on your event cancellation policy, you didn't have communicable disease prior COVID. It's definitely an area that is very, very tough right now.
Okay. This is from Stéphane Cossette. Since the CGL policy is occurrence-based, if my policy did not have an exclusion, could I fall back to that policy when a claim comes in at a future date?
Well, good question on Stéphane's part. It's just that we don't know how the insurer will react to the coverage, even if your policy is silent or not. We don't know because the insurer are not responding to it. But it's a great question. It's a great question that I could push, and I can speak to you, Stéphane, if you want about it within the next few weeks.
Okay, and perhaps this is an associated question. Many CGL insurers in sports area insist on waivers, hold harmless, and assumption of risk programs. Any suggestions / comments on that? I think that's related to the previous question.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a risk management tool from their part, and they want to make sure that each and every one are taking the responsibility to guide their membership or their spectators and inform them that there is risk attached to it. So, but again, it's more on the legal side that you need to look for anything related to these forms and waivers.
Okay. Adrian Newman asks, will insurers offer refunds on liability policy premiums for months when insured properties were completely shut down?
Well, on a liability standpoint, depending who is the insurer, there is some insurers who are flexible, and you need to work with your broker on it, and definitely ask and demonstrate what is the impact on your exposure, and usually the insurers will wait up to the end of the policy term just to make sure, because right now we don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks, right? I remember I was in April and sports like baseball or football or they were saying to us, you know what, our season will be completely canceled, so can I work with the insurer right away to get a refund or something like that? And suddenly, month and a half afterward, suddenly there is some stuff happening. So in terms of going back and forth, we tend to wait at the end of the policy term to get the insurer to agree on or being flexible either on the renewal terms or giving a rebate. But again, there is various insurers that are looking at it completely differently. In terms of sports, we always, most of the underwriting is done by the number of participants. So if, you can prove that you have less participants, it could help to get a relief from the insurer. but there's no certainty about it. But it's you need to work with your broker on that. But there is some insurers who are flexible.
Okay. Another question: since most operations are stopped for a while and events are minimal at the moment, we can expect less claims for this period. Do you think this will help lower premium costs?
For sure, there will be less claim this year because the best way to avoid a claim to happen is to avoid to do something. That's a principle of the risk management. So if you want to avoid something to happen, don't do it. So this being said, I'm going to take you back to the beginning of my presentation where we are in a hard market right now, and independently of COVID. We were in a situation where rates were on the raise. So, and we don't see because of COVID, this is changing. I think, this is still pretty much dominant in terms of stuff. If I have a comment or I have a suggestion, we see raise in best class of risk without any losses. On liability side, I would, and again, I don't want you to take my number for specifically, but it's between 5 and 10% in terms of the raise. And again, it all depends if your risk is changing as well. On the property side, it's way more difficult where we see raise 10, 15, and up to 20. And if you have a lot of losses, it could go up to 20, 25, 40%. But again, I know it sounds very high. But it is what it is right now. It's a very tough market right now in the insurance, and you should plan accordingly to it. In the past, I was seeing a lot of as is, year after year after year. We don't see that right now.
Okay. Sasha, many national sport organizations conduct competitions like right across the country in different jurisdictions, provinces, and markets. Do you have any advice for those organizations from an insurance perspective, or do the local jurisdictional protocols apply in every case?
Well, right now it's fairly limited in terms of traveling available, right? And one topic that I haven't touched yet, and thanks for your question, is travel insurance, because I guess a lot of people on the call are hosting international events, and they have people coming to Canada or some of their athletes going internationally to participate in competition. We are seeing right now that few insurers are covering COVID for travel insurance. This is one area where we see, and again, I'm thinking about one insurer, we're still doing it where all of the others are not covering. So meaning that if some insurer, if you're going into the United States in a near future for competition, they are excluding COVID. So, and it's a fairly high risk. But we have some solutions still on the table for that. And it's one of the area where it's, we still can do something related to COVID. And I think, I would not suggest anybody traveling, away from Canada without having that coverage on his policy for sure.
Well, what about coverage for incoming athletes? Many events, as part of the obligation of an organizing committee, for example, are required to provide air transport into an event. Same concept applies?
Well, usually when you're coming to represent your country in an international competition, it's it's your federation, it's your national federation who's taking care of the insurance. It all depends. But most likely the insurance will come from your federation. So in terms of, when you're hosting it, you have a liability attached to it. And again, we're going back to the same premises where you know, COVID will most likely be excluded. But again, I'm referring you to, you know, the local authorities, you know, what they accept, what you need to do in terms of, you know, all the hand washing and all what's available. And, you know, there's a lot of medical staff involved in these international events as well, right? So, you know, it's kind of hard to know where these international events will go back to normal, but it will at some point for sure. But most likely it's the local federation or the national federation who's providing insurance when they come to Canada.
Great. One more question. I think we have time. We've got a couple of minutes left. This from Pierre-Luc Daou. Do spectators attending activities within a facility, should they be signing a waiver as well, like the participants? And this is from
yeah, it's no different. It's no different than when you go see a show or something like that. You know, you buy your tickets. You have, you know, at the back of the tickets usually you have guidelines and you have stuff written on it, which is like a little bit of waiver. It's like when you buy a steel ticket, right? You know, there is some risk acknowledgement on it. And I'm referring you to what we see right now where we go to the store right now. You know, they usually have somebody at the entrance of the store, you know, telling you that you need to go wash your hand or put some Purell and before getting in. You know, and again, it's the authorities. So if these stores and you take care of telling people, you know, what is the maximum number of people you can add into your facilities. You know, I think it's a little bit like the waiver, right? You know exactly what you're getting into, and you know, there is sign everywhere here in Quebec. I haven't traveled yet to Ontario since the beginning of it, but you know, you could read before getting into a place that, you know, what are the measures in place in order to respect the social distancing and everything.
Okay. Very good. So that takes us to the top of the hour, right on time. So thanks very much, Sasha. I'd like to thank you for participating and bringing some clarity on a very challenging part of the formula for hosting sport events in communities right across the country. Thanks for everyone for participating. And once again, the PowerPoint will be available and posted in the webinar section of our website by tomorrow. So take the opportunity to check for that. In addition, we'll be taking a bit of a pause in terms of webinars given upcoming vacation schedules. I'm not sure where we're traveling to. There's nowhere to travel to, but some of us need a break. And we'll be back in touch with in mid-August with the upcoming webinars that we've got planned for you. So thanks once again, Sasha and participants, and have a great rest of day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.